Hi there, thanks for tuning in to WION World is One. This is Speed News and I'm Isha Hanspal. With me is my colleague Rajni, who will translate the news updates for you. Let's dive straight into our first story. Israeli forces kept up their assault on the Gaza Strip, telling civilians to leave a refugee camp in the north of the Palestinian enclave. Now, the Israeli forces bombed Al-Nusayrat refugee camp in the northern part of the Hamas-ruled enclave overnight, destroying several multi-floor buildings. Israeli planes also dropped leaflets on Al-Nusayrat ordering people to leave 7 districts. Now, Israeli warplanes and tanks also stepped up attacks on Al-Burej refugee camp. The Israeli troops fighting in the Gaza Strip were seen regrouping and restocking their southern Israel as heavy fighting raged in central and southern Gaza. On the other hand, Hamas's armed wing said it had killed 10 Israeli soldiers in fighting in Al-Burej and hit 5 tanks and troop carriers. Hezbollah Chief Hassan Nasrallah has warned Israel against waging war on Lebanon. Now, this warning comes a day after Hamas's deputy leader in Beirut, a southern suburb, well, the attack is blamed on Israel. The head of Lebanon's Hezbollah said they cannot be silent after the killing of Hamas's deputy leader. He further warned that his heavily armed forces would fight without any restrictions if Israel chose to extend the war from Gaza to Lebanon. Now, both the Iran-backed Lebanese terror groups and Hamas have accused Israel of killing Saleh al-Aruri in Beirut's Musharrafiyeh, now a stronghold of the militant Hezbollah group, which is an ally of Hamas. The United States has condemned South Africa's accusing Israel of genocide at the International Court of Justice over its offensive in Gaza. Now, Washington has labeled the charges as completely without merit. South Africa has urged the ICJ on Friday to issue an urgent order to declare that Israel was violating its obligations under the 1948 Genocide Convention. In response, Israel says it will appear before the court against South Africa's accusations. South Africa has supported Palestinian aspirations for statehood for decades. South Africa has accused Israel of committing war crimes since the start of the current war in Gaza. Iran has blamed the United States and Israel for the twin explosions that have killed at least 95 and injured over 200. Now, the blasts took place at a ceremony in Iran to commemorate country's top commander Qasem Soleimani, who was killed by a US drone in the year 2020. Now, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei has vowed a harsh response, while President Ibrahim Raisi has called out Israel. US has rejected Iran's claim of its ally Israel's involvement in the attack. It says escalation in West Asia is in no one's interest. Now, the attack comes on the heels of a raging war in Gaza, which appears to be spreading to across the region. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is heading to the West Asia this week amid intense diplomatic efforts to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian aid into the war-ravaged Gaza. Now, the visit comes amid increasing international pressure on Israel to reduce civilian casualties among Palestinians. Reports suggest that Blinken will start his trip on Thursday and will make stop at a number of capitals. The top US diplomat's visit comes at the time when the risk of a broader regional conflict is escalating. Now, the State Department has said that the United States remains incredibly concerned about the risk of the conflict spreading into other fronts. The UN is constantly collaborating with countries to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian aid. Russia and Ukraine have exchanged hundreds of prisoners of war in the biggest single release of captives since Russia's invasion began in February of 2022. Ukrainian officials have said that 230 of its prisoners were released, while Russia said 248 of its soldiers were returned after mediation by the United Arab Emirates. Now, while the two sides have gone through several exchanges during the war, swap deals stalled in the latter half of the year. The latest exchange was the first in almost 5 months. More than 4,000 Ukrainian service personnel are believed to remain in captivity in Russia as prisoners of war. However, neither side is ready to disclose how many prisoners remain in their custody. Former US President Donald Trump has called on the country's Supreme Court to review a Colorado ruling that bars him from the state's ballot over his role in the January 6, 2021 Capitol attack. Now, Trump has also appealed a similar decision by Maine's Democratic Secretary of State. If the ruling is allowed to stand, it will be the first time in the history of the United States that the judiciary has prevented voters from casting ballots for the leading major party presidential candidate. The Colorado Supreme Court has ruled last month that Trump is ineligible to appear on the primary ballot because of the US Constitution's 14th Amendment. Trump's lawyers have asked the Supreme Court to summarily reverse the Colorado court's ruling. A judge in the US state of Nevada has been attacked by a defendant in a felony battery case. In a video of the hearing, which is circulating widely on social media, the defendant is seen leaping over a courtroom bench onto Judge Mary K. Holtus. Now, the courtroom marshal was injured as he came to the judge's aid and was hospitalized for treatment of a severely bleeding gash on his forehead and a dislocated shoulder. The man was arrested and jailed at the Clark County Detention Center, where records showed he faces multiple new felony charges, including battery on a protected person. South Korean and US troops held joint military drills in Puncheon near the border with North Korea to enhance combat readiness. Now, the drills that started on December 29th ended today. The allies have dramatically increased the scale and intensity of the joint drills in the past year amid the escalating tensions with Pyongyang. Now, this comes as North Korea recently tested 2 long-range ballistic missiles and tactical weapons designed to strike targets in the Pacific. North Korea has called the joint firing drills reckless maneuvers and mocked South Korea for backing Washington's ambitions. Mexican officials have rescued 31 Latin American migrants who were kidnapped near the southern US border over the weekend. Unknown gunmen on Saturday kidnapped the migrants from a bus on the highway in the municipality of Reynosa, close to the border from the United States. Now, migrants are often targeted as they pass through Mexico for extortion or ransom payments by criminal groups who know they are unlikely to report crimes to the authorities. This comes as a record number of people are making treacherous journeys to reach the United States. Now, Republicans have been sharply critical of Democrats' efforts to contain the crisis. The Senate is also pushing for a bipartisan agreement to address the border crisis. The death toll from the powerful earthquakes in Japan on New Year's Day has now risen to 78. The search for survivors under collapsed buildings continues for the fourth day. The earthquakes, including a powerful one with a magnitude of 7.5, jolted the Noto Peninsula in the central prefecture of Ishikawa, causing buildings to collapse and tsunami warnings to be sent as far away as eastern Russia. Now, according to local authorities, the powerful main tremor, followed by hundreds of aftershocks, injured at least 330 people. Japan's cabinet is set to approve the use of its reserved funds to cover damages from massive earthquakes. Bangladesh has deployed armed troops across the country ahead of its national election this weekend, amid fears of violence. Soldiers travelled in armoured vehicles to temporary camp set up across the capital Dhaka to help the civil administration maintain peace and security. Now, the main opposition, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, is boycotting the elections that is set to take place on Sunday. This comes after Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina refused to agree to their demands that she resign and cede power to a neutral authority to run the poll. Hasina has repeatedly blamed the BNP for instigating anti-government protests that have rocked Dhaka since late October. At least 10 people have been killed due to the violence. The Myanmar military government will release over 9,600 prisoners under an amnesty to mark the country's Independence Day. The junta chief praised some countries for supporting his nation. Globally isolated, the Southeast Asian country faced Western sanctions after the military unseated a democratically elected government of Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has arrived in Nepal's capital city for a two-day visit. During the trip, Jaishankar will co-chair the 7th Nepal-India Joint Commission meeting with his Nepalese counterpart. The India-Nepal Joint Commission was established in the year 1987, and it provides a platform for both the sides to review all aspects of bilateral partnership. Jaishankar is also scheduled to meet senior political leaders of Nepal. It is expected that both sides will sign an agreement on the modalities that would facilitate Nepal exporting 10,000 megawatts of power to India in the next 10 years. An encounter has broken out in Jammu and Kashmir's Kulgam district between security forces and terrorists. The Kashmir Zone Police have said that the operation in the area is currently underway. The local police, the army and the Central Reserve Police Force are working in tandem to neutralize the situation. Further details are awaited. India has lodged a total of 541 new JN1 COVID subvariant cases till January 3rd. The cases are spread over 12 states, including Karnataka, Kerala, Goa and Gujarat. The World Health Organization has declared the JN1 strain as a variant of interest that needs intense scientific scrutiny. Although the symptoms are mild, the elderly and people with comorbidities have been advised to remain cautious. Germany's carbon dioxide emissions in the year 2023 fell to their lowest since the 1950s. Less coal-fired power and reduced output by energy-intensive industries have been identified as the reason. But a study warns climate policy changes are needed to make the decline sustainable. Germany is aiming for a 65% cut in greenhouse emissions by 2030 compared to 1990 in order to become carbon neutral by the year 2045. Severe cold conditions continue to prevail over northern India. Dense fog has engulfed large parts of the region. Dense fog was reported on Thursday morning over the states of Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan and Bihar. An orange alert has been issued for cold in Punjab, Haryana and the National Capital Region. There is also a possibility of rain in New Delhi next week. At least 26 trains are reported running late. Several flights were delayed at the Delhi airport due to low visibility amid foggy conditions. States like Madhya Pradesh and Tripura reported moderate fog cover. Cold wave conditions have been prevailing over most parts of the country for the past several days. Now, according to the Meteorological Department, the cold wave is expected to continue for the next 3 to 4 days. The French highliner Nathan Paulin has impressed Chileans by performing on a 50-meter-high slackline spanning 270 meters over Santiago's downtown. Cheers and applause echoed on the ground after Paulin, who was attached to a safety line, successfully ended his performance. The show marks the inauguration of a local theatre festival called Teatro a Mil, which means Theatre to 1,000. The festival will include a series of shows that will take place. In fact, they will take place over public spaces in Santiago and some regions of the country. US chip stocks added to a string of losses on Wednesday, with Wall Street's main semiconductor benchmark tumbling from record highs following its strongest year since 2009. Drops of over 2% in advanced micro devices, Qualcomm and Broadcom weighed most on the PHLX semiconductor index, which was down 2.1%. Remember, the PHLX had surged over 65% in 2023, fueled by optimism about artificial intelligence and more recently by expectations the Fed will cut interest rates this year. The dollar edged higher on this morning as investors reassessed their expectations of the scale of the rate cuts by Federal Reserve this year, with an air of caution hanging over markets after an impressive risk rally last month. Now, the greenback was on the front foot in early deals in Asia as trading returned to full swing with Japan back from an extended New Year break. Minutes of the Fed's December policy meeting released on Wednesday showed officials were convinced that inflation was coming under control and were concerned about the risks of the central bank's overly restrictive monetary policy on the economy. However, there was no clear-cut clues on when the Fed could begin easing rates, with policymakers still seeing a need for the rates to stay restrictive for some time. General Motors edged out rival Toyota Motors to remain the top-selling automaker in the United States in 2023 as easing supply snags and sustained demand drove the industry into its best year since the pandemic. Now, the Detroit automaker shrugged off a hit from a costly auto strike to report US new vehicle sales of about 2.6 million units for 2023. Well, it was up 14.1% from 2022, while Toyota's annual sales rose 6.6% to about 2.25 million vehicles. Overall, US new vehicle sales last year finished at around 15.5 million units, of which electrified vehicles, including hybrids, were up nearly 17%.